3 camping horror stories. Alone in the woods, everything sounds alive. One camper is watched, another is hunted, and high above, something impossible is tracking every move. How far would you go to survive the forest? I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. He thought it would just be a peaceful night alone in the forest, but the deeper the night grew, the more the woods began to speak back. It doesn't take long for things to turn unsettling. Moments after arriving, while dragging his gear through the brush, he hears it. A massive crash, like a tree collapsing in the distance, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten. He freezes, unsure if it's nature or someone else. Trying to stay calm, he sets up camp. The tent goes up quickly. Inside, everything looks neat and secure. Blankets, pillow, food, lantern. It has the appearance of comfort, but looks deceive, because comfort means nothing when the forest around you refuses to stay quiet. While inflating his air mattress, he hears it again, a sharp snap. Not the wind, not his imagination. Something is moving. And then it happens, a sound that cuts through the trees. A gunshot, or at least something that sounds far too close to be anything else. His heart races. He whispers that this wasn't supposed to be scary. It was meant to be peaceful, but the forest has other plans. Trying to brush off the noise, he convinces himself things are fine. He makes his bed, spreads out 2 blankets, and even jokes about living in luxury. But behind every attempt to relax, there's tension, a quiet waiting. Later, hunger wins out. He prepares dinner, opens canned beans, spaghetti, baked food, simple comfort in the middle of nowhere. The glow of his lantern pushes back the darkness, but only just. Then comes the night. Hours pass. He drifts into uneasy sleep. Until around 2 a.m. when suddenly footsteps outside the tent jolt him awake. They're not faint. They're loud, deliberate. Too close, enough to drag him outside, armed with only a flashlight. The night is suffocating. The camera barely captures anything in the black. His phone's flashlight pierces only a fraction of it. And yet, the footsteps had been there. He swears it. And then he sees it. A marking carved into a tree, jagged, out of place. It's not just creepy, it feels like a sign. A message not meant for him, or perhaps meant exactly for him. He wonders a little longer, but convinces himself there's nothing more. Back inside the tent, he tries to sleep again. The air mattress has gone flat, pressing him against the cold ground. The forest is silent, but it's the kind of silence that feels heavy. The kind of silence that waits for something. And then it begins again, clearer this time. Footsteps circling the tent. He calls out into the night, "Hello?" But the only response is silence. Panic takes over. His hands shake uncontrollably, captured on camera as he tries to pack his valuables. The calm of earlier is gone. What's left is pure survival. He abandons camp, mounts his bike, and flees into the darkness. By morning, he returns in daylight to gather what was left behind, but the memory lingers. The footage confirms what he feared. The sounds were real, footsteps circling, watching. But the question remains, who or what was walking the forest with him? Camped in the wrong restricted area. He didn't plan on fear becoming his closest companion. When he first set up his tent deep in the woods, it was meant to be a simple overnight camping trip, nothing more. But from the moment night fell, the forest began whispering promises of something darker. At first, it was ordinary. The cramped tent, the lantern glow bouncing against the fabric, the quiet that presses in when you're isolated miles away from help. He joked to himself, compared his position to being stuffed like a sausage, but that humor evaporated the instant he heard it. Footsteps outside. They weren't distant, they were deliberate. Pressed up against the lantern, his breath caught. Something was circling his tent. He froze, whispering into his camera, straining to see through the thin wall of fabric, and then whispering. More than one voice. His nervous attempts at greeting, "Hello? Hello?" went unanswered. Instead, the sound of steps multiplied, and the whispers grew nearer. He realized with growing dead, 2 people were circling him in the dark. Then came the proof. Something pressed against his tent wall. A hand. He pleaded, shouted, his voice cracking in fear. But the intruders didn't leave. They pulled at the fabric, tugged at the fly, collapsing the tent on top of him whilst he was still inside. Panic surged. He clawed his way out, headlamp shaking, breath ragged, his knife clutched in trembling hands. And through the dark, he saw them. Silent shapes just standing there watching. The smell of cigarettes drifted through the damp air. His voice trembled as he whispered, "I smell you, cigarette. I smell you, cigarette." He begged them to leave him alone, but they only lingered. Then chaos. He stumbled through the forest, gear abandoned, branches snapping, briars tearing at his legs. His camera jostled wildly, capturing fragments of this nightmare. His panicked breathing, the slap of wet leaves, the repeated sound of him crashing to the ground. At one point, his cry echoed in the dark. He had twisted his knee and ankle badly, but fear was stronger than pain, forcing him onward. Every time he thought he'd lost them, he'd hear them again, a shadow crossing behind him, a step too close, voices drifting in the fog. He shouted into the night, cursing, demanding they reveal themselves. The forest offered no reply. Exhaustion weighed heavily. His phone soaked, his nerves shattered, adrenaline ripping through his chest. He admitted aloud that if he had a firearm, he would have used it by now. That's how close, how real the danger felt. When he finally burst into an open field, the fog rolled in thick, muffling sound and vision alike. His breaths turned to gasps. His words became desperate prayers, and then silence. The pursuit faded, or perhaps they melted back into the trees. No footsteps, no whispers. Only the rasp of his breathing in the mist. But the horror was not gone. It clung to him, lodged under his skin. At moments, coming back with hints of cigarette smoke from somewhere around him. From start to end, the camera bore witness to a descent into terror. A man alone in the woods, hunted by unseen figures who refused to speak, who toyed with his sanity, who pressed hands against his shelter and ripped it down around him. Whether they were human or something else, no one can say, but the cigarette smoke, the footsteps, the whispers, they were real enough to drive him running through the forest, trembling and broken, leaving his camp behind. And in the end, what lingers isn't just fear, it's the haunting question. Were they ever gone, or are they still out there, waiting for the next lantern light in the woods? I wasn't looking for Bigfoot. He hunted me. They thought the forest was empty, but with every step they took around Summit Lake, something heavier was following, watching, waiting. It was 1986, and Summit Lake sat remote and silent high in the Cascade Mountains. Rebecca, a forestry student, had come here with 2 classmates to research an insect outbreak. They carried notebooks, cameras, and sample jars, not weapons. That mistake would haunt them. On the first day, the rain hammered down, but eased just enough for them to hike the lakeshore. That's when Trent spotted it. Large, barefoot impressions stamped into the mud. Rebecca laughed it off, insisting it was a bear, but the prints were too deep, too human. By nightfall, the storm returned. Lightning split the sky, thunder roared, and rain battered their tents. But through the chaos, Rebecca heard something else, a shriek, tapering into a moan that stretched too long, too unnatural. It came again and again, 4 times in total. She lay frozen, wishing for something, anything she could use to defend herself. Her friends? They claimed they heard nothing. By morning, they were focused on their project. They split up to cover different sides of the lake. Rebecca, still unsettled, took the western trail alone. That was when the stalking began. At first, it sounded like another hiker pacing her steps on a parallel path. Heavy footfalls matched her stride, but they grew louder, closer. She tried her radio, only silence answered. Then came the growl, a sound so unnatural it made the hair on her arms stand on end. Rebecca froze, peering into the misted trees. A shape emerged, towering, upright, impossibly broad. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't human. It was something else. The creature circled her, its heavy strides crushing branches, then crash! A tree fell across the trail ahead. A path was blocked. Another slammed down behind her. She realized with chilling clarity it was hurting her. When it crossed the trail, she saw it clearly, at least 8 feet tall, long arms swinging, hair flowing as it glided in one impossible stride from tree line to tree line. Rebecca raised her pepper spray, squeezing bursts into the air like a desperate charm against the inevitable. The thing only growled louder, guttural, gurgling sounds that mocked her fear. She ran. Camp appeared like salvation. Gasping, she stumbled into the clearing only to find her friends equally pale, shaken. They, too, had been attacked. Logs and boulders had been hurled at them by unseen giants. Then, the final scream. A howl that shook the very air, vibrating through their bodies. It came from just beyond the tree line, not 50 yards away. They packed in silence, fleeing into the night. Not one of them dared to look back. Rebecca never returned to Summit Lake. The forest she once loved became a place of dread because in those mountains, something still watches. Something that waits. And the question lingers, if you ventured there alone tonight, would you hear it too?